Hey guys, welcome back. If you follow me on Instagram, you would have already seen that Natasha Denona's bronze palette, as well as her bronze cheek face glow palette, arrived yesterday. So I sat down this morning to create a look, play with the shadows to share with you guys. We're gonna do some swatches. I looked also within my own Natasha Denona collection to see if there were any eyeshadow dupes or similar shades we might be able to compare against. There might be one from her mini nude palette and another shade or two from her gold palette. But for the most part, when I watch other YouTubers' channels and they compared it to some shades on Sunrise and Sunset palettes, there just weren't outright dupes. So I think some people would be excited to know that the 15 shades found on here are all new, which I think is how they describe the palette on the website. So here are the shades in the palette against this black backdrop. I just think the whole display of this palette is really, really beautiful. It really makes the shades stand out. There are 4 duochromes and some really foil-like texture metallic shades. I'm very excited about those. And you get a good amount, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 different, 6 different actually matte shades on here that will be great transition colors or base shades that you can put on to give your look more dimension. And then this one shade here that I'll just talk about right now, Deep Dive, is a cream matte formula, and the only other palette that has this formula is going to be from her Metropolis palette. So I thought that was extremely cool that, you know, we can experience this with the bronze palette. And although today I did use the products on this palette on my face to create the look, I won't be demoing it in this video because I want to make a separate video just dedicated to this palette and then be able to compare it against the Bloom palette, the Daria palette, and see what the differences are in, I guess, formulation. We already know, looking at pictures, that the shades are totally different, so I don't think there will be any overlap there, but I'm interested to see how we might apply some of these shades a little bit differently depending on your skin tone than the Bloom palette and Daria. First things though is there are new formulas in the bronze palette. It's going to be the Bounce Cream Glow and the Bounce Cream Blush. So both are cream products, which is actually very similar to Bloom. They're also cream, but I think they're more lightweight. So we'll get into all of those details. If you like the cheek look today, be sure to look out for this video that will be forthcoming. Well, let's head on with the eyeshadow swatches. Starting with the shade on my wrist is True Copper, a metallic shade with a red and orange undertone. Next is Suntan, a matte shade with a red undertone. And then we have Sundown, which is more orange, next to Suntan. Then we have Deep Dive, which is a cream matte formula shade, and it does feel pretty creamy to the touch. Might not be so noticeable as a swatch, but it does have more of a satin finish when compared to the other powder mattes from the palette. Then we have Rhodium, a duochrome that reflects purple and silver, followed by Magma, also a matte shade with a deep red-brown undertone. And then we have High Degree, a red metallic shade, followed by Alloy, a kind of orangey gold bronze. Next we have Ridge, a matte shade with a orangey undertone to it, but it reminds me of a mustard color when you put it next to the other matte shades. The other matte shades either have a really strong orange or a red undertone, whereas I feel like Ridge is kind of in between. Following Ridge is True Bronze. True Bronze has crystals in it, if I remember correctly, and it is a duochrome with a very kind of orangey undertone. Next is Gleaming, also a duochrome with a red undertone that reflects gold. You might have noticed by now that the duochromes on the palette are quite subtle. Next is Palladium, a metallic shade that has a strong brown undertone to it. Followed by Bliss, also a duochrome with a red undertone that is lighter than Gleaming. In fact, it kind of reflects gold, green, and even pink, depending on your lighting. Then we have Silk, this absolutely incredibly foil-like shade. And then finally we have Beach, a kind of beigey almost matte shade that also has that kind of brown orangey undertone to stick with the bronze theme of the palette. So I took out the Mini Nude palette from Natasha Denona, and it certainly has, you know, some bronze palette vibes, but there's actually no dupes. There isn't a shade that is exactly the same. There might be some similarities, which is what is driving that vibe, but again, it's just not even that close. So I did pick a few shades and swatch them next to the bronze palette as a comparison so you guys can see. We have here Soil, which I put right on top of Magma. Soil is deeper. I mean, both have kind of that brown and red to it, but Soil is definitely more brown than red. Then we have Quinn right next to Ridge, totally different tone, much more, I guess, skin-like on my skin than Ridge. Ridge definitely has a lot more yellow to it. And then we have Bronze Age from the Mini Nude palette. I am seriously running out of room, so it might be kind of hard to see. I'm gonna sit a little closer. It's a mess up here. This is Bronze Age, right on top of Palladium. So Bronze Age is redder, whereas Palladium is more of a brown and coppery kind of color. I think Bronze Age, if it wasn't already on the new palette, would actually be a good addition to the bronze palette. I think it fits right in with the theme. Interestingly, this one is more like an extension of the bronze palette, I think, except maybe for some of these cooler shades here, but we definitely have some that I think, you know, would play well with the shadows on the bronze palette. And for comparison, while we're at it, I actually swatched a few shades from the gold palette, not similar in tone, in anything. So I won't even go really deeply into it. I'll just mention, which is why this part of my arm looks like a big mess. I think I put Varus right here. Not the same, very brown in comparison to anything close to it, anything from the bronze palette. And then here, I believe this is Kava, and also much more yellow. So there you have it. Let's head on to the tutorial. We're gonna first start with Sundown, and we're gonna put that all over the lid. I feel like if I just wanted to do a monochromatic look, I could just put this color down, pick a lid topper, and just be ready to go. And maybe even apply this as a blush. Then we're gonna go in with Deep Dive, and we're adding that to the outer corners and moving the shade towards the middle of the lid. I'm gonna buff it out. And then I'm taking Rhodium as a transition shade, placing it towards the center or on the center of the lid. You know, I'm not sure how well Rhodium is actually being deposited onto my lid with a brush, so I'm gonna try using my pinky. And Rhodium is a duochrome. I'm going to just do this. I feel like I'm getting more color in that way. And then because I want the transition between Sundown and Deep Dive to be a little bit more seamless or smoother, just easier on the eyes, I'm gonna add Ridge just right here to get a little bit more of a transition going. Obviously Ridge is still much lighter than Deep Dive, but I think it's gonna make it a little softer and look a little bit more seamless. So you can tell the difference with Ridge blended into Sundown and Deep Dive and versus here where we didn't make that transition yet. And then we're taking Silk, using a finger or a pinky. I'm gonna place that onto the inner corner and just moving this, you know, into the center of the lid and maybe even upwards. Yep, we are moving that upwards, center of the lid. And we're adding just a bit of Bliss on top of Silk because I want that kind of red that we're seeing from blending, you know, Deep Dive and Rhodium. I just want a little bit of that red to come through when we're looking at the center. I'm gonna clean up a little bit under the eyes, put on foundation concealer, and we'll come back for the remaining touches. All right, we're gonna go in with Deep Dive again, and we're actually gonna tight line on the lower lash line. And we're not gonna go all the way to the inner corner. We're just doing that about halfway or 3/4 of the way through. Then we're gonna go in with Sundown and just blend that color into the lower lash line. And we're not actually using Sundown to smudge. We're just putting it right underneath. You know, there will be a little bit of blending because if the bristles touch, it'll do a little bit of that, but I'm not gonna be too intentional about blending the two. I just want the under eye to look clean, but still have some of the smokiness, if you will, of all the color from up the top, just to have some of that on the bottom. And then for the brow bone, I'm actually going to take the Bronze Cheek Face Glow palette and using the Bounce Cream Glow. Using my finger, I'm gonna add that onto the brow bone. And I could have used any powder, formula, any other brand to add a brow bone highlight, but I figure on the theme of this bronze palette here, this seemed to be a really great fit. I could have gone with this shade, I could have gone with this as well. Actually, why don't we even do the Super Glow Nude, just to top off our Bounce Cream Glow. This face palette here, this bronze face palette, can also be used as eyeshadows as well. We might do a video trying that at some point. So there you go. This is the finished look. I think Natasha Denona has done it again. I really enjoy this palette. When I looked at the swatches just on my arm to see, there are definitely groups of color from the palette that are very similar. And it does make you think, okay, well, if I use, you know, these really warm red undertone shades here, am I gonna get a look that's like a little bit too similar that I can't create dimension? It depends on your placement of color. I would say, you know, if you're using Magma and High Degree and Gleaming, so for example, these 3 shades here, you might not get much of a tone difference when you combine all 3. You're gonna have different textures. So I think what would be good to do is to go into these more orangey or more cool tone shades, even these 2 up here, to add to dimension. But again, I remember using Sundown in the demo first and thought, oh, if I wanted a monochromatic look, I can actually use Sundown on my lid, put down, you know, a shade topper, any of these to give it some texture, use Sundown on my cheeks, and there you go, I have my look. So you can potentially actually do the same thing with any of these shades here. Might not be able to use Magma as a blush, but I can see you just using these 2 colors or these 2 colors here, or maybe these 3 can put this into, not really the inner corner, it's a bit too dark, but you can just kind of give it some texture around here or use it as a transition shade. So if you are comfortable in going from, you know, these rows of shades here to mix in with any from here, I think that's how you make your look more distinct. And to recap the shades I used for today, we started with Sundown here all over the lid. Then I put Deep Dive into the outer corners, blended in towards the center. We use Rhodium as kind of a transition shade to give it more texture. And then we went back in with a matte shade, this here Ridge, because I wanted a more seamless or a smoother transition between Sundown and Deep Dive where it sat on my crease. So we kind of blended that in. And then I added Silk, that very foil-like finish from the inner corners to that upper part and almost to the center of the lid, stopping short of that. Then I added Bliss just on top here to kind of bring back some of the red or coppery look that we were getting before adding Silk. So I think as you play with the colors, you almost just let your intuition guide you on like, what's the next shade that I can pick from this palette here to complete my look or just make it a little bit more interesting. I really enjoyed how this turned out. And to wrap things up on the lower lash line, we took Deep Dive and tight lined it just halfway or 3/4 of the way through. And then I added Sundown to sort of just smoke things out here. So I think now you still have a dramatic but clean look, and I'm gonna head out and run some errands just like this. So I enjoy playing with this palette. If you've been thinking about it, maybe this would have helped your decision, but I do have more videos coming. We're gonna do another video creating probably 2 different looks using the bronze palette. And then, of course, with her bronze cheek palette, there will be a separate video for that as well. I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you liked the video, give me a thumbs up. And if you're new to the channel, welcome. Subscribe, ring the bell to get notified every time new content is released. Take care. See you guys later. Bye.